If you enjoy spine-chilling, ultra-realistic horror stories that'll keep you up at night, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a terrifying tale. Also, I'd love to know where and at what time you're watching this. Drop it down in the comments below, whether it's 3 a.m. in your bedroom, midnight on a road trip. I've worked a lot of jobs in my life. Everything from bussing tables at a diner off Highway 12 to laying asphalt in July heat so brutal the tar stuck to your boots. But the one I stuck with longest, the one that paid the bills and let me keep my own hours, was night maintenance at a regional grocery warehouse about 30 minutes outside of town. It wasn't glamorous. Most nights it was me, a couple of forklift guys, and a graveyard supervisor named Earl, who spent more time in his office watching old VHS tapes than actually supervising. But the pay was decent, and I liked the solitude. I've always preferred working nights. There's something about those empty hours when the world feels paused. No traffic, no chatter, no background noise. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional echo of a pallet jack down a concrete aisle. It gives your mind space to wander, though sometimes that's not always a good thing. This happened a little over a year ago. I remember it like it was yesterday because it was the week after the county fair packed up and left town. The last of the carnival lights had barely faded when the nights turned heavy with humidity, and you could feel that uneasy quiet that settles over rural places when summer winds down. I was covering for the regular overnight guy, Clay, who called out sick, which meant a longer shift than usual. Started at 6 p.m., wasn't off until close to 4 in the morning. It was a Thursday, one of those stretches where the days blur together. By the time I clocked out, the place was dead quiet. Even Earl had gone home early because his stories weren't on tonight. The warehouse smelled of dust and motor oil. The floor was still damp in spots from where I'd run the scrubber earlier. The overhead fluorescents cast a weird yellow-white glow over the empty aisles of bulk pasta and canned tomatoes. I grabbed my thermos, punched the clock, and stepped out into the lot. The air outside was thick with that late summer humidity, the kind that clings to your skin like a damp sheet. The security light over the lot buzzed faintly, attracting a swarm of moths that battered themselves against the plastic cover. I climbed into my old Toyota Tacoma, a 96, a little rust around the wheel wells, but it ran. Turned the key, felt the engine catch, and headed for home. I lived out on the edge of Mason County, down a long stretch of 2-lane road that cut through about 10 miles of woods and empty farmland before you even hit a gas station. No streetlights, no houses you could see from the road, just trees, fence posts, and the occasional weather-beaten mailbox. I made that drive hundreds of times without thinking. I knew every curve, every stretch where the blacktop cracked and buckled from heat. Knew where the deer liked to cross near the Miller farm, and where to slow down on rainy nights when the ditch flooded. But that night felt wrong from the start. About 5 minutes into the woods, I realized something was off. It took me a second to pinpoint it. The road was too dark. Normally, even on overcast nights, you'd catch glimpses of moonlight filtering through the canopy, or the occasional glow from a porch light off in the distance. But this night, it was pitch black beyond the reach of my headlights, like the trees themselves were swallowing the light. I cracked my window, let the thick air in. No crickets, no frogs, no wind in the branches, nothing. Just the steady hum of my tires and the muted drone of my engine. I told myself it was the weather, maybe a storm rolling in. I kept driving. Then, about a mile before the old Miller Farm turnoff, I saw something at the side of the road. At first, I thought it was an animal, a stray dog maybe, or a deer. Happens all the time out here. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't on the road at all. It was standing just inside the tree line. A person. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield. It was a man, or what looked like one, standing perfectly still between two trees, half hidden by branches. No reflective gear, no flashlight, just standing there. His face was turned toward the road, but his features were lost in shadow. I couldn't tell how old he was or what he was wearing, but I could feel him watching me as I passed. I didn't stop, didn't even tap the brakes. Something about him made my gut twist. It wasn't that he was there, it was how he was there. Not walking, not waiting for a ride, not moving at all. Just standing, still as a fence post. I told myself maybe it was a hunter or someone hiking and got lost. But nobody hikes those woods at night. Not for years. There's too many old wells and sinkholes, too many places to disappear. About a quarter mile down, I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. Nothing. The road behind me was empty. I pressed a little harder on the gas. I was about 2 turns from home when I saw him again. This time, on the opposite side of the road. Same posture, same distance from the road. Same goddamn shadowed face. I slammed the brakes, my heart hammering. There was no way. No side roads back there, no shortcuts through those woods. No way anyone on foot could have moved that fast, not through trees that thick. I didn't get out, didn't open the window, just sat there for a second staring at the figure standing between the pines. Then my phone lit up, in the passenger seat. Unknown number, no caller ID, no name, just the ringing. I ignored it. The call ended. Then another, and another. I grabbed the phone, my hands slick with sweat, and hit decline without even looking. I wasn't about to answer. Then, the last call came in. Same number, but this time instead of ringing, it went straight to voicemail. I didn't check it until I was home, doors locked, truck parked with the high beams pointed at the edge of the woods behind my house. The message was 4 seconds long, just breathing, close, ragged, uneven, and then a voice I didn't recognize. Saw you. That was it. I called the sheriff's department. A deputy came out, drove the stretch of road with his spotlight, found nothing. No tracks, no one on foot, no recent calls about a missing person. He said it was probably a prank, a drifter, maybe someone trying to scare drivers. But I know what I saw. And I haven't taken that road home since. Even now, sometimes when I'm outside at night, I get the feeling someone's standing just at the edge of the tree line, watching. Sometimes I swear I see the faint glow of eyeshine just beyond the reach of the porch light, a flicker of pale movement when the wind stirs the branches. And every now and then, my phone will buzz in the middle of the night. No caller ID, no number, just silence. I had just finished my initial military training, basic, AIT, a few other classes, and got sent to my first duty station. My unit was at NTC for pre-deployment training, so I met up with the rear echelon. I get issued my room and spent 3 very disturbed days/nights in the barracks with weird stuff happening, like gear not where I left it, locked drawers being opened, the microwave turning on by itself, shit like that. My roommate, who I knew throughout training, showed up on the 4th day, and I told him something along the lines of, "Watch your shit, someone's been fucking with my stuff, and I don't know who." So the 4th night comes around and myself and my roommate secure our room and gear and go to bed. Gotta be up at 05:30 for PT, so it's an early night. We lock all our stuff and go to bed. I woke up around 01 cause my blanket had fallen to the ground, and I was cold, which was weird cause we were in the south in summer, so it's always hot. I hop down to get my blanket, and I notice my armor is open, so I open the lock, close it, lock it, and get back to bed. I fell back asleep pretty easily, but But I woke up again at about 02:30 and all my stuff and my roommate's stuff was thrown around the room. I wake up my roommate and he's pissed because someone is fucking with us and can't figure out who it is. We clean it up, lock our stuff, and go back to bed. I woke up a third time at 03:37 and was not alone. I can hear my roommate snoring, so I know it's not him. I sat up and saw someone in the little kitchenette area with the fridge open, looking in it. I was freezing again. I was about to say something as the soldier turned around. My eyes had a moment to adjust to the bright light, and then I started recognizing gear like the L-shaped flashlight on his shoulder, his Alice pack with magazine holders and canteens, boots and fatigues. This dude was combat ready. As my eyes reached his face, he turned a bit and I could see it. Half his head and helmet were gone, blown off by the looks of it. I'm scared shitless at this point. He closed the fridge, walked across the room keeping his bright green eyes on, opened my front door, and walked out. As he exited, he turned back around and said to me, "Be safe." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I didn't wake my roommate up. I just sat up in bed for about 2 hours till I had to get ready for PT. 6:30 rolls around, so everyone is outside the barracks in formation getting ready to start PT, and the acting first sergeant says, "Hey, not Chase, you good? Looks like you aren't a ghost." I replied with, "Negative. I'm fine. 1SG. Good to go." About halfway through PT, he comes up to me and asks me what's wrong because I'm visibly shaken up. I told him I was fine. I just couldn't sleep last night. A few others asked if I was okay, and I just lied and said I was fine. I really wasn't, and they could see that, but they let me be. After PT ended, the acting 1SG pulled me to the side and told me to speak freely, openly, and with all confidentiality and off the record. What is wrong? I told him that if I told him what happened, he would think I'm batshit crazy. He assured me it was off record and once again said, "Talk to me. You seriously look like you've seen a ghost." That got an awkward chuckle out of me, and I began to tell him my story, and when I got to the part about his head, the acting 1SG lost his shit. "Who the fuck put you up to this? This is not funny," etc., etc. He smoked me for about 30 minutes, made me do push-ups, mountain climbers, stuff like that, all while yelling at me that I'm a piece of shit. Finally, after about 30 minutes of that, he says, "Look at me in the eye and swear on everything that you love that you're not lying to me." I told him I was not lying. It fucking happened. So he says, "Follow me," so I do. We got to the command office, which I had never been in, and they were obviously locked. He takes me behind 3 locked doors and 3 rooms I had never stepped foot in, and when he opened the last door, I saw it. It gave me chills. It still gives me chills, but plain as day, there's the soldier's portrait behind the commander's desk. I froze and said, "That's him." Acting 1SG, the guy who assigned me that room, told me who it was. He was a corporal in the unit on my unit's first deployment to Iraq, and he died in an IED attack that took off part of his head. I was the first soldier to be assigned that room since it belonged to the deceased corporal. He forgave me and I forgave him, and he told me some stories about who this guy was. I deployed with that unit just a couple months later and spent 12 months fighting in that shithole. I nearly died I don't know how many times. My vehicle got hit with IEDs and rockets, and it always made me think of that corporal. I survived more things than most people can imagine, and I always felt like that corporal was keeping an eye out for me. Not everyone in my unit was as lucky as me. 3 from my company didn't get to come home. I've always liked driving at night. There's a kind of peace in it you don't get during the day. The empty roads, the way headlights slice through the dark, how the world feels smaller somehow, quieter. It makes you feel like you're the only person alive, which is either comforting or unnerving, depending on the night. I started working nights when I was 24. Before that, I'd bounced between jobs: grocery stocker, dishwasher, even the stint helping my cousin with his landscaping business. Nothing really stuck. Small towns like Edgewater aren't known for opportunity. Most folks either worked at the mill, the hospital, or spent their days at the bar, nursing beers and stories no one else wanted to hear. I wasn't interested in any of those. When I heard about the opening at the parts distribution center on the edge of Briar Hollow, I took it without hesitation. It was a graveyard shift job, packing boxes, unloading trucks, checking inventory. Not glamorous, but it paid a little better than minimum wage and came with health insurance, which in a town like ours was almost unheard of. Briar Hollow itself was a strange place, bigger than Edgewater but not by much. It had a courthouse square, a handful of diners, and a hardware store that sold everything from light bulbs to live bait. The parts warehouse sat on the outskirts, surrounded by acres of flat land that turned into dense woods the further you drove east. Folks around here had all kinds of stories about those woods. Missing hikers, strange lights, even whispers of old ghost sightings. I never paid them much mind. I wasn't superstitious. For the first 2 years, the job was uneventful. I got used to the rhythm of it. Clock in at 6 p.m., spend the night moving boxes, or operating the lift if someone called out, and clock out when the sun started to rise. I didn't mind the quiet. In fact, I preferred it. The few people on shift were decent enough. Curtis, one of the other night guys, was a quiet, lanky guy who smoked like a chimney, but knew his way around the inventory system better than anyone. Earl, the graveyard supervisor, was an old-timer who barely left his office and mostly passed the hours watching old westerns on a TV from the 90s. Most nights were so slow you could hear the click of a dropped bolt echo clear across the warehouse. The only excitement was when a delivery truck arrived later than scheduled, forcing us to scramble to unload pallets before the sun came up, but even that became routine. I kept that job for 3 years, and in those 3 years, nothing much ever happened, until one night last September. I remember it because it was the week after Labor Day, when the evenings start getting a little cooler, but the air still hangs heavy with the last breath of summer. Briar Hollow always smelled like wet earth that time of year. The days were shortening, the nights growing thicker and quieter. It was a Friday night, technically Saturday morning. We'd just finished unloading a late shipment of alternators. Curtis clocked out around 2:30 a.m., giving me a wave and a muttered, "See you Monday." Earl had already left, claiming a headache, though we all knew he just didn't feel like working weekends. By 2:45, I was the last one in the building. The warehouse felt different when it was truly empty. The big overhead lights buzzed louder, the smell of grease and cardboard hanging thick in the air. I clocked out, grabbed my jacket, and stepped out into the lot. The air was muggy, holding onto the day's humidity. The single security light buzzed, a halo of bugs swirling around it. I got in my truck, an old Chevy Colorado my uncle sold me for dirt cheap after he quit driving. The driver's side window stuck halfway, and the radio only picked up 2 stations, a country channel and a preacher who spent the overnight hours warning about the end times. I pulled out onto State Route 18, the main road that cut through the county. From the warehouse to my place was about a 20-minute drive, mostly 2-lane highway, no traffic lights, nothing but farmland and tree lines. I'd driven it hundreds of times without thinking. That night, for whatever reason, it felt Off. You know when you get that nagging feeling, like you forgot something. Not panic, not fear, just a vague wrongness in the back of your head, like something was just a hair out of place, too subtle to see, but enough to set your nerves on edge. I cracked the window, let the heavy air in, killed the radio, preferring the sound of my tires on asphalt. Usually, I found that drive relaxing, a way to clear my head before bed, but not this time. About 15 minutes into the drive, I passed the old Sinclair gas station at the edge of Briar Hollow, boarded up now, weeds taller than the sign, a familiar landmark. 3 miles past that, there's an old mile marker, bent a little to the left, with the number 237 stenciled on it. It was one of those small things you pass so often it becomes background noise. I always glance at it. It's just a thing I do. That night, when my headlights swept past it, I saw something that made my stomach twist. A man standing next to the marker. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a tree, stump, maybe, or a reflector catching my wearing what looked like a pale jacket or hoodie. His face was turned slightly away, so I couldn't make out much, but there was something about the way he stood, stiff, shoulders a little too high, that made my skin crawl. Nobody walks that stretch of road, not at that hour, not out there. I kept driving, told myself it was probably a drunk, or maybe someone whose car broke down. Still, every instinct I had was screaming at me to not stop. About a quarter mile ahead, there's a small gravel pull-off I sometimes used to turn around if I needed to. I made the mistake of glancing in my rearview mirror when I passed it. The man was still there, but now he was in the middle of the road, not walking, not chasing, just standing dead center in the lane where my taillights left a patch of fading red glow. I swallowed hard. My stomach turned to ice. My first thought was to turn around, maybe check if he needed help, but something deeper, that old, ancient kind of instinct that sits beneath logic, told me no, that if I stopped, if I so much as slowed down again, something bad would happen. So I kept driving. About a minute later, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. No caller ID. Now, I don't usually pick up unknown calls at 3 a.m., but I was already on edge, and some dumb part of me thought maybe it was Curtis or my supervisor. I picked it up without thinking. I didn't even get a chance to speak before I heard breathing. Slow, ragged, too close to the mic. "Hello?" I said. The line crackled. The breathing stopped. Then a voice, not a yell, not a whisper, just a flat, emotionless voice. "You left me." My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone. I don't remember much of the next 5 minutes, just a blur of curves, headlights bouncing off trees, and my pulse hammering in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached the Edgewater city limits, pulled into the parking lot of the 24-hour laundromat, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The phone was still in the cup holder. No missed calls, no record of an incoming number. I sat there for a long time, engine running, staring out at the empty street. A stray dog trotted by. A single moth flitted around the flickering sign over the laundromat door. I kept telling myself it was a prank, that maybe it wasn't even the same person by the mile marker. Maybe it wasn't anyone at all. Maybe I was just exhausted, but I never drove that road again after nightfall. I took the long way home for the rest of the time I worked there, added an extra 15 minutes to my commute, didn't care. The strangest part? About 3 weeks later, I heard from Curtis that a guy had been hit by a delivery truck out on 2. I've always preferred working night shifts. There's something about the quiet hum of a sleeping world while you're still awake that makes me feel different. Not in a lonely way, just removed, detached from the constant noise of daylight hours. It started when I was 22, fresh out of trade school and desperate for a steady paycheck. I took a warehouse job over in a town called Fairbrook, about 20 minutes from where I lived in a place called Millfield. Millfield's the kind of place people only know if they've grown up there or gotten lost trying to bypass city traffic. One grocery store, 2 gas stations, a crummy diner with a neon sign that flickers half the time, and streets that cut through patches of woods so thick they drown out the sky at night. I'd been working that job for about a year when this happened, about 6 months ago now. The schedule was unpredictable. Some nights I'd clock out at 10 p.m., other times closer to 2 or 3 in the morning. It wasn't bad, though. The roads were always empty on my way home, which meant no traffic lights to get stuck at and no one tailgating me down those winding back roads. That night was a Friday. I remember because my supervisor, Danny, had been griping all shift about how weekends meant all the young guys slacked off. I finished packing out a late shipment and clocked out a little after 12:30 a.m. I said goodnight to Marcus, the security guy at the front, and stepped outside into the heavy summer air. The sky was overcast, no moon, no stars, and it had that kind of stillness where you can almost hear the silence pressing against your eardrums. I unlocked my SUV, a dark blue 2012 Ford Escape that my dad helped me buy when I first got hired, and started the drive home. Fairbrook's main strip was deserted as usual. The occasional streetlight flickered overhead, and my headlights lit the road ahead in that pale, clinical yellow beam. The first 15 minutes were uneventful. I took Highway 47 south, then made the turn onto Deer Hollow Road, which was a narrow 2-lane stretch cutting through about 5 miles of dense woods before you hit the Millfield town limits. I'd driven it so many times I could probably map the curves and dips with my eyes closed. I was maybe 5 minutes from home when it happened. It started like any other night. Windows cracked to let the night air in, radio off because sometimes I preferred the quiet. The only sound was the hum of my tires on the asphalt. My headlights stretched ahead into the darkness, the road a narrow thread between walls of trees. Then, something moved. At first, I thought it was a deer. You get used to them out here. They dart across roads all the time, especially in summer. But this wasn't a deer. It was a figure. A person. I squinted, leaning forward slightly. The figure was far off, maybe 100 yards ahead, moving out from the tree line and onto the road. It happened so fast and so silently, it almost didn't register at first. "What the hell?" I muttered, easing off the gas. The figure stopped dead in the middle of my lane. My headlights caught enough to see it was a man, average build, dressed head to toe in dark clothing. It wasn't until I got closer that I noticed he was wearing something over his face. Not a ski mask, exactly, but one of those balaclavas with just the eyes and mouth cut out. Goosebumps prickled along my arms. I slowed to a crawl, maybe 10 miles per hour. The guy wasn't waving me down, wasn't signaling like he needed help. He was just standing there, still, facing me. "This has got to be a joke," I said out loud, though the sound of my own voice in the empty car made my skin crawl worse. I checked my mirrors. No cars behind me, no headlights in either direction, just me and this guy. I tapped my horn, a quick sharp beat, no reaction. He didn't flinch. "All right, asshole." I edged into the opposite lane to go around him, keeping my eyes locked on him the whole time. As soon as my tires crossed the yellow line, he stepped sideways, directly into my path again. My stomach dropped. I jerked the wheel back to the right, trying to slip past on my side again. Same thing. He mirrored my movement. keeping himself squarely in front of my SUV. What the I stopped the car. For a half second, neither of us moved. I kept my hands on the wheel, the headlights washing over him, illuminating his unmoving frame in harsh light. Then he started walking, slow, deliberate steps, toward my car. Panic swelled in my chest. This wasn't someone broken down needing help. This wasn't a drunk wandering onto the road. Everything about it screamed, wrong. I threw the car into reverse. The SUV jerked backward, tires crunching gravel at the road's edge as I clumsily backed away. The man picked up speed too, walking faster, closing the distance between us. Shit. I wasn't good at driving backwards fast. Most people aren't. And every second, he gained ground. I glanced down, fumbling to hit the lock button on my door, even though I usually lock them by habit. The faint click sounded like a gunshot in the silence. When I looked up again, he was breaking into a sprint. My pulse pounded in my ears. I yanked the wheel, hard to the right, trying to whip the car around. The tires skidded in the loose gravel at the road's shoulder, and for a moment, I thought I was going to nosedive into the ditch. Somehow, I corrected it, and in the brief second I was motionless switching from reverse to drive, I heard it. A hard, muffled thud against the SUV roared forward, tires squealing as I shot down the road, leaving the man behind. I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror, a dark shape standing in the middle of the road again, framed in my taillights, then swallowed by darkness as I sped away. I didn't slow down until I hit Millfield's outskirts. My hands were shaking. I kept glancing in the mirrors, half expecting headlights to appear behind me or another figure to step out from the trees. I pulled into a gas station by my house, the one with the busted ice machine and the flickering open sign, and sat in the parking lot with the engine running. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was Marcus. Marcus, yo, you get home okay? Shit went down at the warehouse after you left. Some nut job was creeping around outside. Cops came. My blood ran cold. I texted back, one-handed, still catching my breath. Me, what he looked like. Marcus, dude in black, had a mask, didn't get him. Cops said to be careful. You good? I didn't answer right away. The thought that maybe it was the same guy, that he'd been near my job and somehow made it to that road ahead of me, or worse, wasn't alone, made my stomach turn. I told Marcus I was fine, then drove home. I didn't sleep that night, or much the week after. I never saw him again. But every night since, when I drive that stretch of Deer Hollow Road, my stomach knots up. Every shadow between the trees feels like it might move. Every empty lane feels like it might not stay empty. And sometimes, even now, I swear I see someone standing just at the edge of my headlights. I've worked a lot of jobs in my life, more than I probably should have. Some you take to get by, some you take to forget what came before. None of them ever stuck, except night work. Started young. First real job was flipping burgers off Highway 60. Greasy little joint where the grill was so thick with old meat drippings you could taste last week in your dinner. Did a stint mopping up hospital hallways on graveyard shift, stuff no teenager should have to clean, let alone see. 2 summers laying asphalt in July heat that baked you from the inside out. But none of it stuck. What did? Deliveries. Night ones. There's something about driving through empty streets, headlights carving their own path, the world asleep while you haul someone else's mess from point A to B. Started as a helper. Big guy named Troy did the muscle. I logged the sheets and kept the wheels from running off. Didn't take long to build up the muscle. The nerve came after. fridges, gun safes, treadmills too heavy for some yuppie installer. If it didn't fit in a regular truck or couldn't be trusted with white gloves, they called us. Last couple years, I've been running with Ozark Freight Solutions, small outfit out of Nixa, maybe 8 of us total. We took the jobs no one else wanted, overnight appliance swaps, last-minute hospital runs, and sometimes sketchy ones. No questions, no names, no looking inside the box. Most nights were simple: roll up, drop off, signature, gone. There's a rhythm to it, like clockwork: load, deliver, log, drive. Then came that night, early November. Weather was turning, warm days, but by night, your lungs would bite back with every breath. Windshield wouldn't stay clear no matter what you did. I was sitting in the truck finishing some awful coffee from a truck stop off 165 when the dispatch came in. Hot tub delivery, rush priority, Branson Lake Ridge Estates. Read the address again, didn't like it. Branson Lake Ridge Estates was one of those cliffside millionaire hideouts. Custom homes, curved roads, private docks. I'd only been there twice. Both times the contractors looked at me like I'd tracked mud on gold-plated floors. The note said, "Deliver to 4th floor deck. Contractors on site will assist." That didn't sit right either. Something rushed. No mention of safe access, no mention of lighting, two thrown together. I texted back, confirmed, en route, ETA 12:15. Tossed the cup, fired the truck, hit the road. Highway was quiet, just me, a few semis, and the occasional deer too dumb to be scared. I like it that way. The road's honest. It was propped open with a piece of lumber. No code, no security. Red flag. Followed the road uphill, past empty lots and half-built mansions. Construction lights threw long shadows across skeleton frames. Felt like walking through a graveyard for homes that hadn't been born yet. Found the house at the very end. Big one. 4 stories, front flush with the hill, but the back dropped straight into black. Mist rolled off the lake. Cold. Silent. The kind of cold that sets into your jaw and doesn't leave. Killed the engine. 6 guys were huddled near a heater. All construction types. Muddy jeans, tired faces, eyes like they hadn't slept in days. One waved me over. "You the hot tub guy?" "Yeah." "About time. We were gonna start without you." Joke didn't land. Too much tension in the air. "Says he wants it on the back deck," the guy added, jerking a thumb toward the house. "Told your dispatch it'd be ready." Ready was generous. The deck was a death trap. No railing, just a skinny line of boards leading out to the far corner. No lighting, no support posts, nothing between you and a 4-story drop into cold, dark nothing. I've worked in some shady setups, but this was another level. "You gotta be kidding me," I said. Some kid couldn't have been 20 grinned and tossed me a Red Bull. "You're gonna need this, man." Drank half without tasting it. "All right," I said. "Let's get it done." We rolled the tub off the truck with a makeshift ramp. Heavy, yeah, but not the worst I've handled. The tough part was the slope. Muddy yard. A second ramp to the porch. Inside was all exposed beams, loose wiring, and half-finished everything. Took us 40 minutes to get it to the patio doors. Then we hit the real problem. That deck. From inside, it didn't look bad. But the second you stepped out there, your knees felt it. Just a narrow strip of wood, wet from the mist. Slick as ice. The corner where the tub needed to go looked 100 miles away. "Nope," I said. "This ain't right." But no contractor showed. The crew didn't have time to wait. I could feel it. This was going down tonight no matter what I said. Took a deep breath. Checked the straps. Double-checked the dolly. And I rolled that tub out onto the edge of the world. Halfway across that deck, the wind picked up. The wood beneath my boots creaked. The edge of the deck felt closer than it should have. I turned back toward the house and wheeled the tub a few inches forward. I had two choices, leave it here or finish the job. But the house didn't feel right anymore. The silence inside wasn't just emptiness, it felt watched. Something shifted in the shadows of the open framework. A movement just past the door frame. I froze. My breath hung in the air, white and trembling. And then I saw it. Not a person, not quite. It was standing in the far end of the house, half shrouded by beams and dangling cords. Tall, too tall, shoulders hunched forward. Its eyes reflected the dim construction light like an animal's, but the shape, the wrongness of it felt all wrong. It didn't move. Neither did I. My hand went to my phone, slow, careful. The screen lit up. No signal. The thing stepped forward just once. No sound, just that awful shift in the air, like all the warmth in the room had been sucked out. I left the dolly, bolted back across the deck, boots slipping on the slick wood. The wind shrieked past my ears. I didn't stop running until I reached the truck. Door open, keys still in the ignition. I turned the key. Nothing. Click. Click. Nothing. The lights flickered inside the cab. My breath caught. Behind me, the floodlights around the house flickered and dimmed. And then I heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming down the gravel driveway. One by one, the floodlights blew out. Pop. 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 Darkness swallowed the sight. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, turned the key again. The truck coughed to life. I didn't look back. I don't remember half the drive back. Just the headlights slicing through fog, my heart hammering like it wanted out. I pulled into a gas station 2 towns over and sat there until the sun came up. When I called dispatch, nobody answered. Next day, I drove back in daylight. Couldn't help myself. Needed to make sense of it. The gate was locked. No sign of a 2x4. I parked down the road and walked up the hill. But the house? Gone. Just an empty lot. No construction materials. No lumber. No signs of recent work. Just mud and tire tracks. Mine. I've always believed that some of the worst things in life happen on the roads no one talks about. Growing up in a town like Miller's Creek, that belief came naturally. It wasn't the kind of place you'd find on postcards. About 6,000 people lived there. Most of them either working at the steel plant or commuting out to surrounding towns for better pay. The rest just lingered, stuck in the rhythm of old habits, half-abandoned diners, and roads with names no one bothered to change after the people they were named for either died or disappeared. My mom used to say Miller's Creek was the kind of town you only left in one of two ways: with a college scholarship or in the back of a hearse. I wasn't smart enough for the first option and too stubborn for the second. So by 19, I was juggling community college classes during the day and a job delivering pizzas in the evenings for a joint called Tony's Oven. Tony's was one of those places every town has. Greasy, slightly overpriced, and run by a guy who looked like he hadn't smiled since the Carter administration. It wasn't a bad gig, though. I liked the people I worked with, the tips were decent, and I enjoyed driving. Especially at night. Less traffic, cool air through the open window, music playing just loud enough to feel like a soundtrack to your own personal movie. It made me feel like I was somewhere else, even if just for a little while. The night this happened was a Friday, October 6th, to be exact. It sticks with me because it was the night before my best friend Mason's birthday party, the one he wouldn't shut up about for a month. I had the closing shift that night, which meant running deliveries until close to midnight, then helping clean up before heading home. I remember the air smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke when I clocked in around 5:30. The kind of evening where you could tell fall had finally settled in for good. The dinner rush came and went in its usual messy, chaotic way. Kids running through the lobby, phone lines ringing off the hook, and Tony barking orders about crust thickness and delivery times. By 10:30, it had quieted down to a handful of late-night orders. I was hoping for an easy one so I could finish my shift, grab a beer from my fridge at home, and binge-watch something brainless. Instead, Jenny, the girl working the counter, slid me 2 slips of paper. "Double order," she said, blowing a bubble with her gum. "Both prepaid, cash tips on delivery. Could be a nice end to your night." I glanced at the addresses. The first was on Hemlock Road, about a 10-minute drive from Tony's. The second one was on Briar Hollow Lane, a name I didn't recognize. I squinted, leaning forward slightly. The figure was far off, maybe 100 yards ahead, moving out from the tree line and onto the road. It happened so fast and so silently, it almost didn't register at first. "What the hell?" I muttered, easing off the gas. The figure stopped dead in the middle of my lane. My headlights caught enough to see it was a man, average build, dressed head to toe in dark clothing. It wasn't until I got closer that I noticed he was wearing something over his face, not a ski mask exactly, but one of those balaclavas with just the eyes and mouth cut out. Goosebumps prickled along my arms. I slowed to a crawl, maybe 10 miles per hour. The guy wasn't waving me down, wasn't signaling like he needed help. He was just standing there, still, facing me. "This has got to be a joke," I said out loud, though the sound of my own voice in the empty car made my skin crawl worse. I checked my mirrors. No cars behind me, no headlights in either direction, just me and this guy. I tapped my horn, a quick sharp beat, no reaction. He didn't flinch. "All right, asshole." I edged into the opposite lane to go around him, keeping my eyes locked on him the whole time. As soon as my tires crossed the yellow line, he stepped sideways, directly into my path again. My stomach dropped. I jerked the wheel back to the right, trying to slip past on my side again. Same thing. He mirrored my movement, keeping himself squarely in front of my SUV. What the I stopped the car. For a half second, neither of us moved. I kept my hands on the wheel, the headlights washing over him, illuminating his unmoving frame in harsh light. Then he started walking, slow, deliberate steps, toward my car. Panic swelled in my chest. This wasn't someone broken down needing help. This wasn't a drunk wandering onto the road. Everything about it screamed, wrong. I threw the car into reverse. The SUV jerked backward, tires crunching gravel at the road's edge as I clumsily backed away. The man picked up speed too, walking faster, closing the distance between us. Shit, shit, shit. I wasn't good at driving backwards fast. Most people aren't. And every second, he gained ground. I glanced down, fumbling to hit the lock button on my door, even though I usually lock them by habit. The faint click sounded like a gunshot in the silence. When I looked up again, he was breaking into a sprint. My pulse pounded in my ears. I yanked the wheel, hard to the right, trying to whip the car around. The tires skidded in the loose gravel at the road's shoulder, and for a moment, I thought I was going to nosedive into the ditch. Somehow, I corrected it, and in the brief second I was motionless switching from reverse to drive, I heard it. A hard, muffled thud against the SUV roared forward, tires squealing as I shot down the road, leaving the man behind. I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror, a dark shape standing in the middle of the road again, framed in my taillights, then swallowed by darkness as I sped away. I didn't slow down until I hit Millfield's outskirts. My hands were shaking. I kept glancing in the mirrors, half expecting headlights to appear behind me or another figure to step out from the trees. I pulled into a gas station by my house, the one with the busted ice machine and the flickering open sign, and sat in the parking lot with the engine running. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was Marcus. Marcus, yo, you get home okay? Shit went down at the warehouse after you left. Some nut job was creeping around outside. Cops came. My blood ran cold. I texted back, one-handed, still catching my breath. Me, what he looked like. Marcus, dude in black, had a mask, didn't get him. Cops said to be careful. You good? I didn't answer right away. The thought that maybe it was the same guy, that he'd been near my job and somehow made it to that road ahead of me, or worse, wasn't alone, made my stomach turn. I told Marcus I was fine, then drove home. I didn't sleep that night, or much the week after. I never saw him again. But every night since, when I drive that stretch of Deer Hollow Road, my stomach knots up. Every shadow between the trees feels like it might move. Every empty lane feels like it might not stay empty. And sometimes, even now, I swear I see someone standing just at the edge of my headlights. I used to work nights at a gas station just outside a small town called Willow's Edge. If you tried to find it on a map now, you probably wouldn't. Not because the place doesn't exist, but because no one's cared enough to update those maps in years. Willow's Edge sits way out on Route 9, about an hour and a half north of Clear Falls, surrounded by thick woods and cornfields that seem to stretch out forever. Most of the people who live there either never leave or end up vanishing into bigger towns like Bristol or Crosswater. Back then, I was 23 and going through one of those stretches in life where everything feels temporary. I'd dropped out of college after a year and a half, mostly because I had no idea what the hell I wanted to do. My mom still lived in town, and my dad had been gone since I was a kid, some argument I barely remembered the details of. I moved back home for a bit, but after a few months of feeling like a failure under my mother's watchful eyes, I found a crummy apartment above an old hardware store and landed a job working overnight at the corner stop gas and market. It wasn't a 24-hour chain or anything fancy, just one of those family-owned gas stations with a couple of old, clunky pumps, a tiny store that sold lukewarm coffee, stale snacks, and the kind of bait worms you find in styrofoam cups. Mr. Dorsey, the owner, was an old-timer in his late 60s who had worked at that place since before I was born. He hated working nights and figured paying a kid like me $8 an hour under the table was a fair trade. I didn't mind it, honestly. The town was dead after 9 p.m., and by midnight you could count the number of passing cars on one hand. Most nights I'd stock shelves, sweep the floor, and sit behind the counter, watching whatever late-night infomercials were playing on the ancient box TV bolted to the ceiling. This was before smartphones were a thing, so the TV and the occasional AM radio station were about all I had to keep me company. The gas station sat alone at the edge of the woods, with no streetlights around for miles. On clear nights, the sky stretched out like a blanket of glass, and you could see every star. On foggy nights, though, and there were a lot of those in Willow's Edge, you could barely see 5 feet past the glass doors. The woods would get swallowed up by that thick, wet mist, and it always gave me a kind of unsettled feeling. I'd tell myself it was just nature doing its thing, but there was something about those trees at night that didn't feel right. Everyone in town had a story about those woods, old legends about people who went in and never came out, about strange lights and noises no one could explain. I never believed in any of that crap, at least not then. It was the Thursday night in late October when the weirdness started. I remember because Halloween was coming up, and Mrs. Teague from the bakery had dropped off a box of pumpkin cookies for me earlier in the evening. It was one of those nights where the air felt heavy. Not cold exactly, but thick, like the kind of weather that promised rain without ever delivering. It was around 1:30 a.m., and I hadn't seen a car in hours. The radio was playing some old country station, but the signal kept cutting in and out with static. I was sitting behind the counter with my feet propped up on a milk crate, lazily flipping through a tattered issue of Sports Illustrated someone had left behind weeks ago. I had just about nodded off when the bell above the door chimed. It was one of those old-school mechanical bells that let out a sharp, metallic clang every time the door opened. I jolted upright, half expecting it to be some drunk local looking for a six-pack, but when I glanced up, there was no one there. I frowned, set the magazine aside, and leaned over the counter to look through the front windows. Nothing. The pumps sat in the misty darkness, and beyond them the road was empty. The bell hadn't sounded faulty before. It was literally a piece of metal strung up with a wire. I stood up, grabbing the small flashlight I kept behind the register, and made my way around the counter. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking a little in the stillness. Nothing. The only sound was the faint hiss of the cooler fans and the distant chirp of crickets outside. I checked the aisles, walked past the racks of chips and motor oil. No one. The bathrooms were locked, as they always were after midnight. It was empty. I was about to chalk it up to a draft, even though the door had a heavy hydraulic hinge and shouldn't open on its own, when I noticed something outside. A figure, standing just beyond the farthest gas pump. At first, I thought it might be a trick of the mist, but no, it was a man. He was just standing there. His posture was strange, almost rigid, and he wasn't facing the store. He stood sideways to it, looking off toward the tree line across the road. I remember thinking it was odd that I hadn't heard a car pull up. There weren't any vehicles in the lot, and it wasn't like anyone could have walked from town. The nearest houses were miles away. I pressed a hand to the glass, squinting through the reflection. "Hey, buddy," I called out, knocking against the door with my knuckles. No response. He didn't move. I could see he was wearing a dark jacket, something heavy like denim or canvas. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe older. His head was shaved, and even in the poor light, I could tell he had on sunglasses, which made no goddamn sense at all at nearly 2 in the morning. My stomach nodded in that quiet, primal way it sometimes does when your brain registers something's wrong before you consciously realize it. I considered staying inside, just letting the guy do whatever he was doing and hoping he'd leave. But a part of me felt like I needed to confront him. Whether out of boredom, stupidity, or some misplaced sense of duty, I couldn't say. I grabbed the old baseball bat we kept under the counter, unlocked the door, and stepped outside. The air was thick and cold against my skin. The mist swallowed up the sounds of the crickets, and it felt like the whole world had gone quiet. I approached slowly, the gravel crunching under my boots. "Sir," I called again, a little louder. "You okay out here?" He turned his head slightly at the sound of my voice, though his face was still hidden by those dark lenses. "I need 1,500, he said, his voice low and rough, like sandpaper against wood. I stopped dead in my tracks, gripping the bat tighter. "1,500 what?" I asked cautiously. He took a step closer. $1,500. Something in the way he said it made my skin crawl. Not a request, not a demand. Like it was something that was supposed to happen. Something inevitable. My hands started to sweat against the smooth wood of the bat handle. "Look, man, I don't have that kind of money. Nobody keeps that in the till overnight," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Another step. He was maybe 10 feet away now. "I need it," he repeated, firmer this time. That was when I caught a glimpse of something dark under his jacket. Not a gun, but something metallic. I didn't wait to find out what it was. "Back off," I warned, raising the bat. His face twitched, a brief grimace that showed yellow teeth in the weak glow of the overhead lights. I turned, bolted back for the door, and he lunged,